Hello and welcome back. Been off for a little while. I've been a little bit busy with conferences, giving talks, polishing my head, brushing my beard, the usual stuff that I do. And today we're looking at API platform. So I've heard a lot about API platform. I've spoken to a lot of people about API platform. Been recommended it by so many people. I've never properly dug into it. I've read the documentation, was intrigued, loved the spider, and I thought, perfect opportunity. Let's do some first impressions into web API platform. So let's go have a look. So, excuse me while I drink some nice coffee. We've actually got the creator of API platform with us today, which is like amazing. It means that I don't have to ask ChatGPT my stupid questions. I can ask the creator of the platform, so that, wow, I'm going to apologize in advance because I'm probably going to ask way too many questions. But I'm just going to bring him in and let's say hello to Kevin. Hey, Kevin. Oh, you're muted at the moment. Unmute your mic.
Hi, Steve. How are you?
Okay, my audio's just gone wonky donkey for a second. Let me just speaker. I'm going to stick it on that one.
Okay. Thanks, Steve, for having me today. Hi, Steve. How are you?
I think. Oh, come on. Can you say something again?
Okay, thanks very much for having me today, and I'm very glad that you try API platform online, and I hope that the experience will be great and that we will not have so much demo effects.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get there, right? So first off, API platform, it's more than just an API. So that's the first thing that I noticed is, I was told, oh, check out API platform if you build APIs. I was like, okay, that sounds great. But it does more than that. So you've got all of the Docker setup. It does all the API. It can do all the API stuff for you. And then you can start scaffolding the client apps as well. So it's just like from idea to like an MVP of here's my API, here's a SPA client app that can deploy in Vercel or wherever. And it's there. Like, you've just saved me more time than I thought I would do. He's got an admin interface, which is also super helpful. And it's got Mercure support as well as Vulkan support. So it's just like everything you could ask for in an API out of the box with a simple setup, with Docker and, Docker pull and run and away it goes. So I've actually got a repo. I'm going to drop the repo in the chat. This is basically just the generated one from the documentation using the template. It just gives everything to you without any hassle, without any thought. It's got all the content negotiation, all the potential APIs that you might want from REST, GraphQL. No, is there any plans for future gRPC support, or what are you kind of thinking on that one?
Currently, it's mainly focused on REST APIs. It has been the main architecture that we implemented. At some point, we added support for GraphQL. So most of the infrastructure should be ready for gRPC support and extra format support. But currently, we have no plan for adding native support for gRPC. But as usual, it's an open source project. And it's an open source project, and it is ready to. We are likely to accept contributions if someone is motivated on working on that. So,
well, I'm hoping someone smarter than me can do that, because I don't think I'll be able to manage it. So by default, this is Symfony based, I believe. But I believe a couple of weeks ago you released a beta for Laravel as well.
Yes, actually, the library is a standalone PHP library that you could use without framework or with any framework. There is a documentation entry explaining how you can bootstrap everything from scratch. And for instance, you can see that some snippets in the documentation are executable. You get a working API right into the browser. And to do that, we actually load the standalone library and the PHP interpreter as a WebAssembly library right into the browser. So basically, it's theoretically not necessary to have Symfony, but the integration with Symfony is great and is the easy way to get started with API platform.
Yeah.
And yes, we are working on a better integration with Laravel, and we will release a Laravel provider soon. Actually, there is already an experimental library that you can install to try it by yourself, but it's not as clean and as ready as the Symfony integration for now.
Yeah, I've been paying attention because I've been looking at API platform for quite a while. Haven't had time to dig in. I saw that there was Laravel coming, and as someone who uses Laravel daily, it was like, oh, that that's perfect because I do APIs in Laravel. It's what I've done for the last 7 years, and I've always been looking for a way to make building APIs in Laravel easier. And I was worried that I was going to have to build my own approach until I saw your announcement. So thank you for saving me countless hours, days, and weeks.
Actually, it's Antoine Blucher, one of the main contributors that is working on that. And he's not very, very familiar with Laravel. If you or people in the community are Laravel experts, don't hesitate to give feedback on the experimental approach to see if it's the Laravel way. It will be very helpful, actually.
I think that's a key thing when you're trying to kind of, I suppose, create a bridge towards that Laravel aspect is you've got to make sure that you're not losing that developer experience that Laravel developers are used to. We're used to, short, simple kind of, framework APIs that we can really, quickly and easily use. We don't want to have to do too much wiring up. We just want things to work out the box. Use, the facade pattern just to access things where we need to. So keeping that familiarity is always going to be vital in success, right?
Exactly. And
so let's have a look at API platform. So I have got repo is here. Here's the docs. So I'm going to go through the docs. So getting started. I have done this first step. Bootstrap API. So installing the framework. This first part here. I generated a GitHub repository from the template. And then I just git clone. Then I did the composer build. I did the composer up. I didn't do wait though. I wonder if that's going to cause issues. I suppose we'll find out. So out of the box, we get Caddy, PHP, PWA, and database. So if I go check my orb stack that I use, where are you? Orb, here we are. So I've got database, PHP, and PWA. What I didn't get was Caddy. That might be a me problem. We'll find out. So it is.
Did you download the 3.1 or the 3.2 version? The 3.2 version is being released, so both versions are still supported. You can see that in your composer.json file in the API directory. So it's 3.2. So actually, it's still the distribution is still in beta, but we are releasing the stable version as we speak. So it's kind of an ongoing process. And so the documentation is not up to date, but in 3.2, we switch from PHP FPM to Franken PHP, which is one project that we developed too, and that allows to reduce the number of Docker containers and to simplify everything, basically.
Yeah, I've been watching Franken PHP for a while as well, and at first I was so jealous at it. I couldn't get it to run on Laravel out of the box. For those not aware of Franken PHP, it is
But now it works with Laravel, and we will release the support for Laravel Octane, integration with Laravel Octane this week. It's almost ready. It's working on my computer. It will be on GitHub soon.
Yes. No, it's amazing. I've been watching it for a while. I've used things like Laravel Vapor. I've used Swool. I've used Roadrunner and from Spiral Framework, and that approach it's like the future of like a PHP server, right? It allows you to have that long running thread with worker processors, and really it allows PHP to do what PHP does best while utilizing other tools to kind of enable that. So this was just another amazing invention by you. So again, thank you for this one. This stream, I promise it's not just going to be me saying thank you, but we'll get to the actual code in a second. So we do have, apparently we can go to this local host. Let's see what it does. That'll do the exact same thing. So if I click on the admin, this will load. Okay, cool. So no greeting yet. I want to add one, test, save. That works. Fantastic. To the API, we can come through, click try it out, execute, and we've already got one. That was easy, right? All I've done is git clone, docker up, docker build and docker up, so 3 commands. And I've got a working API with a working admin interface and a working PWA for me to just get started. Wow, I think my job here is done. That is just so easy to use. Got some good headers, cache control going on, e-tag, perfect, nice permissions policy. Yep, all of the headers that I would typically add. There's maybe a couple more that I'd add, but I suppose you can't make too many decisions out of the box, right? That is a key thing with, I suppose, APIs is you want it to be a certain level. It's also got content negotiation. So let's have a look at this. You've got control the accept header there.
By default, we only enable JSON-LD, which is basically JSON with some kind of metadata for security reasons. But if you go in the configuration, you can enable more formats. For instance, if you go in the API directory, config, packages, because it's a Symfony installation, so it's the standard platform. Symfony API platform. And here you have formats. And for instance, you can add, let's say, JSON API, which is another popular format. So the key, it's not like that. Basically, the key must be the name of the format and the value, the related MIME types. So add a new.
Okay, so if I go to the docs for that, that might be useful, right?
Yes, there is a doc for that. You can use the search engine. It will be easier, I think. Yes,
figuring formats. So it's nice that you've got lots of content on Symfony casts as well, because what I find really useful is documentation gets you the majority of the way there. Playing with it yourself gets you almost there as well, but having those videos to kind of back up and reinforce that learning really helps kind of fully understand.
Ryan Weaver is doing a very, very great job with the screencast, and basically when he's recording a screencast, you can expect a lot of pull requests to fix a lot of things. So it's a very, very good job.
So we do have HAL support, which is fantastic. Do I need to do anything to kind of reload that, or is that kind of reloaded by default? Wow, perfect. So let's try that out, execute that. Perfect. Oh, wow. So I can, you've got all of these different versions, right? So let's add JSON API, because typically what I use in a Laravel application would be JSON API. Although I am enjoying HAL a little bit more recently. I had some really interesting discussions at Nordic APIs where I was last week about kind of the different versions of API specification versions that you can use. Nice.
My favorite is JSON-LD with Hydra. Obviously, it's why it's the one that is enabled by default, and it's the only JSON-LD is the only web standard for APIs, unlike other formats which are community standards. But the main idea in API platform is that JSON-LD and RDF are first-class citizens, but all other popular formats should be supported by default and are actually supported by default, at least for the server part. For the JavaScript tools, the focus is on OpenAPI and JSON-LD.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I like about, I suppose, one of the best things with like the LD JSON is that it follows the schema.org quite closely, right? Exactly. So it allows you to kind of just map things into, you can basically take some of the LD JSON output and just add that into your PWA or static site build, whatever it might be that you're building on the front end, and you're adding all of that kind of enriched data to be discovered by Google instead of having to kind of do manual conversion yourself and maybe do some guesswork.
Exactly, and it's also kind of a super open API. And for instance, all the JavaScript tools, the scaffolding tool and the admin tools that we provide are just work with any API, even if they are written in PHP, and they just do a call to the Hydra endpoint of the API. And everything is built dynamically client-side by parsing the Hydra JSON-LD documentation.
Yeah, nice. So, I mean, you said JSON Open API, so I'm already happy. So let's have a look at the code itself. So if I just kind of close all of those quickly. So a little bit unfamiliar to maybe some who use Laravel on a day-to-day basis, but we're going to dig in and we're going to have a look anyway. So it's somewhat familiar if we look within here. So the main difference, I suppose, will be we've got the source directory for our application instead of an app directory. That works. We've got our main kernel here, which is great, just using the microkernel trait. Perfect. We've got a repository, entity, and a controller. So our greeting is here. We've got the API resource. So from my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, Kevin, but to create like an API resource or an endpoint, as we might call it, we add the attribute for API resource to an entity, and you do lots of kind of mapping behind the, under the hood to allow CRUD behavior, basically.
That's exactly that. There are basically two ways to use API platform. The first way is to put a class describing the public data model that you want to expose through the API in a directory called API resource or entity for historical reasons that I will cover later. But you can also put them in the API resource directory that need to be created. And then basically API platform will handle all the infrastructure part of your application. It will register the corresponding REST routes for this data. It will generate some OpenAPI and JSON-LD documentation for this data by doing this kind of mapping between the, basically you will use PHP as a documentation language with more expressivity than JSON or YAML. It will register the routes. It will handle the serialization, deserialization, data validation, and many, many other things. And the only thing that you will have to do is to plug your own business and persistence logic. So you will have to implement some interfaces to let API platform fetch the data from somewhere and to hint API platform how to save the data that will be submitted through a post or patch request. And there is another way that extends this basic way of using API platform. If you are using Doctrine ORM or some other popular database library, we have experimental support for Laravel Eloquent too. Then you can use some black magic that will provide for you the implementation of the interfaces that will fetch and save the data. So in this case, we used the rapid application development mode. And so because the class is mapped both with the API resource attribute coming from API platform and the entity attribute coming from Doctrine, then automatically what we call the state provider and state persisters from the API platform Doctrine bridge are automatically used, but it's entirely optional. You don't have to use Doctrine if you don't want, but if you use it, then it's magic. You just map your entity with the database and the JSON documents that you want to expose, and that works.
That sounds amazing. I can see here you've got you got assertions so that you can do validation, which is perfect. We've got a get ID. We've got our migrations over here, which is somewhat familiar to us in Laravel. Maybe not exactly the same, but if you're used to SQL, then you can understand this and you can use it quite nicely. Perfect. We got migrations out of the box. We got our config. Routes, I'm assuming these are all kind of just generated, so we don't have to do anything with routing.
Yes,
but it leaves us open to it if we would want to kind of add specific routes that might not be API resource routes, but kind of like meta routes that we might want to kind of grab things for.
Exactly. Actually, the API directory is just a vanilla installation of Symfony with the API platform bundle added in top of it. So you have all the features and all the default choices of Symfony. It's the exact same code that you will get by using the Symfony new command. And in the PWA directory, it's a Next.js application generated with the official scaffolding tool of Next.js with the API platform JavaScript libraries added in top. So every bundles and extensions that you can find for Symfony will work with API platform. It's also why you have a controller directory by default. It is useless with API platform unless you want to use some Symfony features outside of the API platform routes.
So you don't really need it. It's there in case, right? If you're building just kind of a RESTful API for your PWA, then define your entities, sit back and enjoy the show, right?
Exactly.
Nice. So what's next in the docs once we've kind of gone through? So if I go through kind of like getting started, configuring the web servers done by default. Let's jump into the core. So getting started, we've installed it, mapping entities. We've got an entity so we can understand that. I suppose you need to be somewhat familiar with Doctrine, perhaps.
If you want to use the Doctrine bridge, which is entirely optional, yes, it's better. But there is one feature that is very interesting in API platform and in Symfony. It's the maker bundle. Basically, you have a command that is shipped with API platform and with Symfony, allowing you to define your classes that you want to expose through the API from the command line. And that will generate for you the class, the mapping, the Doctrine mapping, the migrations, and everything. So basically, it's kind of a no-code CLI tool that you can use to add new entities. And you can, of course, modify the generated code if necessary after that.
That sounds fantastic. How do I use that? Is there a page in the docs for that I can kind of follow?
Yes, I think that it's in the main Getting Started guide. If you go in the distribution, take the first guide from the distribution section. Yes, this one, and look for maker or something like that. You should have some examples.
So the maker bundle. So make a bundle, I think it's an API resource.
So you have some examples of how to write the code by hand in this documentation, and also you can just run this command to execute the maker bundle, and everything will be interactive after that.
Let's give that a go, because I mean, in the Laravel world, we're very much used to kind of artisan this, artisan that, go do this for me because it's quicker. I don't use it much, but for models, yeah, definitely. So let's have a look. So if I run this, what's it going to do? So we're going to stick with Brave Kangaroo. Oh, no, it doesn't let me. Okay. New property name, name, age. Oh, enter type, my bad. So that would be an ASCII string. Can this field be null? Okay. I get you. So we're just going to stick with the name. Perfect. So I think something like that takes a little bit of getting used to when you come from like Laravel, where it's just, artisan make this, then I'm going to go and fill it in over here. We don't have that kind of that interactive mode so much. No doubt we will have it at some point, but right now it's not our kind of, I suppose, our typical approach to doing that.
This command maker bundle has been created by Ryan Weaver from SymphonyCast, and if I remember correctly, initially it was a port or a copycat of Laravel Artisan.
It works. Okay, so we've got Brave Kangaroo. We've got a nice repository, find by example, field, find by one. Excellent. So once that's been done, it says we can run the diff to see what
so just maybe one thing, be careful with the name of the entity. I saw uppercase N at name, and it may or may not cause issues, but it's not in sync with the conventions actually.
Yes. That is my fault.
So, unfortunately, I think that you will also, yes, to rename all of this.
Name.
So currently, Maker Bundle is still generating getters and setters. That was the way in Symfony in previous versions. We will probably migrate it at some point to use public properties instead, and it's entirely supported by API platform. It's not just generated by default yet by the code generator.
Okay, so that works. Make sure I haven't got anything in here that's to do with the name as well.
Unlike Laravel, it's not used here. I think that you will not have references to name here.
Perfect. So if I just make this a bit bigger so we can do this. Perfect. So then I can Docker compose exec and run that migration. Fantastic. So now if I come back to the admin, for example, reload this. We got Brave Kangaroos, create one. We're going to call this one Jeff. Come back to the docs, for example, and suddenly we can get those out of the box, execute, and Jeff is already, that is just so easy to use. I'd probably end up making maybe some bash aliases to kind of shortcut having to kind of remember Docker compose exec, this specific thing, then do this. Or maybe a make file, something like that could be quite useful for this. So I can say kind of, make migration diff, make migration commit, that sort of thing. So I can commit that to memory quickly.
There are two tricks that you can already use. The first one is that if you have O my Z ZSH installed, then you already have, at least if you enable the Docker Compose plugin, you will have aliases for most Docker Compose commands. For instance, you should be able to type DCE for Docker Compose exec.
Oh, nice.
And then, and I think that it also works with Laravel because if I remember correctly, it's a feature of the Symfony console component that is used under the hood by Laravel too. You can type short forms for any Symfony command as long as there are no conflicts. So for instance, instead of doctrine migrations migrate, you should be able to type D colon M, and it should work if there is no other commands that match.
But I've not actually tried that before. That is so. Oh.
Yep.
I didn't know you could do that. That is amazing. I learned something new today about the console that I've used for years. Oh, that's amazing. Wow, like I kind of lost for words because it just works. Yeah. I was expecting to have to do a little bit more, to be honest. Yeah, I've used Symfony in the past, like Symfony 2 and 3, and I always felt it kind of cumbersome to build things in compared to Laravel because, you know, it's a different framework. It does things differently. They've got their own methodologies and conventions and for their own reasons. So it always felt cumbersome. So when I was like, oh, API platform, kind of, it's a Symfony thing. That's kind of, you know, what it's seen as. It's, you know, build APIs with Symfony. That's what it's for. And I thought, it's going to be a bit cumbersome. It's going to be like building a Symfony app, but it's not. It's actually easier than building an API in Laravel. And I didn't expect that today. I wasn't prepared for that to happen. Now what am I meant to do? I was expecting to be spending an hour going through this, like, okay, so this is how we do it, and this is how we have to connect it, and it's nothing like that. It's a couple of commands, and it's there. There's like very little code you need to do as well. A lot of it can be done from the command line. You can scaffold an API. You know, I could have this, you know, let's just drop that full screen and stick it on the left. I could have that there and have, you know, we'll put that on the right. Yeah, if this was my open API spec, I could have a CLI open here, just copy, add the, you know, add the parameters, add it all, create that basic CRUD, go back in and fine tune where needed. And I'd be done in half the time of what I'd usually be done because
actually you can even use API platform just to build your open API file. For instance, if you add docs.json, if I remember correctly, in the URL, you will get the corresponding open API file. And so if you want to use it as a prototype for an API that will be written in, I don't know, Rust or something like that, it should be possible. I don't recommend that, but anyway.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's
JSON.
Okay, maybe we changed that recently. Add JSON .json open API. Add open API in the extension. Yes.
Wow.
And yes, this is that.
That is just so much easier. Like, hey Chris, hey Ludovic, we got a fellow French person in the chat here, Calvin. Laravel Jutsu, obviously he does Laravel, but he's a fellow French person, good friend of mine. And Chris, hello Chris. So I mean I was expecting to spend an hour going through this, like going through how to create an API with API platform, but if you cut out all of the kind of casual conversation, I could have done this in 15 minutes.
And of course, you have a lot of other features, some of them
Yeah.
built on top of Symfony, some other specific to API platform. For instance, you have automatic pagination that is out of the box if you are using Doctrine or other supported ORMs, or you have some interfaces to implement. And so we have an integration with Faker that comes from the Symfony world, but that is now maintained by Laravel people, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And so you should be able to populate your database with a lot of fixtures using Faker, and then you should be able to see the automatic pagination in practice. So,
So install Foundry.
Yes, Foundry is a PHP package maintained by a core contributor of Symfony that is basically bridging the Doctrine fixtures and Faker and adding a lot of cool features on top of that.
Perfect. So I've done that first command. Then I need to make a factory for a specific entity. So we are going to go for app entities or entity, sorry. And then we're going to go for greeting.
Yeah, and I think that if you omit the class name, then you get an interactive mode where you will have the list of the entities that will be suggested or something like that, if I remember correctly.
Let's have a look. That you've thought of everything. You're not making it easy for me. I'm expecting to have problems with creating some of this. So source factory. So let's go have a look at that. Let's close this down. So got data fixtures, we've got factory, we've got the greeting. That's already pulling things out from the database anyway, which makes it really easy. So this is going to use Faker, and this is a greeting. So let's say we're going to use a sentence instead. Brave kangaroo. We can swap that to a name. Data fixtures here will, I'm not 100% sure what that does yet, but we can figure that out. So to do factory, that is done. Review factory, then we make a story. I remember reading about this part where it's the way, so a story is basically like in Laravel what we'd call a seeder, perhaps. So it's you call a series of factories, perform some logic, and that is how we seed our database to a certain state. Whereas in this, you call it a story. Is that correct?
I think so. I'm not a specialist of this part, but it looks like that, yes.
So we're going to call this default story. Let's go have a look at that story and see what it is, see if it is what I think it is. Where did it store that? That is a question. Source story. Aha, down here. Default story. Build your story here. So, book factory, create. Okay, so okay. It's like a seeder. Naming different, but it's what we would call a seeder. So let's say we're going to create a greeting factory, create many, and we're just going to create, I don't know, 50.
Yes, you need more than 30 if you want to trigger the automatic pagination. So that's good.
Yeah, 50 should give me, actually, no, what we're going to do, we're going to go for 98, a nice round random number. Edit the fixtures. So we basically want to load that into the fixture. So we'll ignore that for now, and we're going to say default story load there. Doctrine fixtures load. Yes, happy with that. Is there anything else I need to do other than okay? I can write tests. That's fine. I'll probably come back to the testing. I want to know how it works to know how to test it, right? But okay, so if I come back to here and we just say go to docs. Now if we go to greetings, page number is 1 by default. We have now got, we go to HAL, for example, execute that. We have got a lot of them. So we can just kind of swap the page now. So let's go to page 3. And it just works. Wow. That's like, it's as low code as you can get for building a REST API, right? That is just perfect.
Do you want to try another cool feature, like a low code one? Try to add a filter on this data. For instance, let's add the ability to search for entities matching a certain name.
Okay.
So to do that, you can browse the documentation and look for the search filter, and you will see that with a single attribute, you will be able to get a filter that works, that is documented, and that is taken into account by the JavaScript tools.
Okay, so filters are services, and they link to resources in 2 ways. So the resource declaration, the filter attribute.
Okay, that's not the good page, I think. Search for search filter.
That one?
Yes, probably. Yes, it's better. And look for the search filter attribute. Yes, this one. Okay.
This one. This is how I typically do it.
And basically, yep, you can do that, or you can also add the API filter right on the property that you want to be searchable, like the name property in your case.
Okay, cool. So if I go to entity and come down to like greeting, for example,
yes,
I can add a
yep. And the first parameter must be the name of the filter. Of course, you can create custom filters if you want. So it will be search filter. It's the class name. Yes, you can probably do that, but it's optional.
Oh, that's completely optional, that bit.
It's completely optional. You just search for search filter as the first parameter. Yep, and be sure to select the one for doctrine ORM. So the second one here. Okay, class. It's just the class name, and then it's optional too. But you should add a strategy, so you can add a strategy name parameter.
Okay, so
as a second parameter, you can type strategy. Yep, but you can actually yes. And for instance, you can, let's use the value. We have constants on the class, but you can use the value I partial in a single word as a string. Basically, I is for case insensitive and partial is for partial. Okay, that should be enough.
Okay, so go back to the docs and let's have a look. Reload this, come over to greetings.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, let's just execute that and see what it does. And name equals TE. Wow. TES. That's so much easier. I don't have to like add root parameters. I don't have to then accept it. I don't then have to map that into eloquent where queries or use a separate package like the sparsely Laravel query builder, which will then allow me to grab requests and maps that into. It's just so much easier just to get that API thrown together, right?
Yep. And as you can see, the new filter is documented in the OpenAPI documentation, but also as part of JSON-LD metadata in the Hydra search. Yes, it's also in the OpenAPI documentation. Basically, when you are using the API testing tool, it's just Swagger UI, which is passing the OpenAPI files that you are reading. So there is no black magic. We just use the vanilla Swagger UI with a custom CSS, but the only thing that we change is CSS.
Wow, it just works. My mind's been blown at how easy it is just to get this done.
And if you go back to the admin and you refresh the admin, you should also be able to use the filter in the admin.
So if I come to greetings, wow. Oh wow, it all just works together nicely.
That is the power of web standards.
Yeah. Like, I mean,
and the filtering is done server side in SQL. It's not just some filtering in JavaScript. It's entirely done at the database level.
Nice. Okay, so let's have a quick example, and let's do it outside of here. So let's go to HTTP, for example, install that on the next launch. We're just going to create a new request here. So we are going to go to what will be this one. So I'm assuming that is just that /API.
There is, by default, it's at the root. There is no /API. It's just /greetings.
Okay, so this isn't working for that. Does it respond on HTTP?
No, unfortunately, I think that you will have to accept the certificate somewhere. I'm not familiar with this tool, but there is probably a way to accept the certificate.
I'd have to do something on my Mac to accept that. I believe certificate is not valid. Blah 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 blah.
Yes, it's a self-signed certificate.
Yeah. Okay, you can do it. It's not too difficult to do, but it's a bit of a pain to do.
If you want, another option is to disable HTTPS.
Yeah. But we don't want to do that, right? I mean, it's self-signed. You just have to like accept it, basically, right?
Exactly, but that's easy to do.
Where is the certificate stored?
So basically, by default, we use the caddy web server. So you will have to go to the caddy file, which is in the API directory. No, or maybe in the Docker directory. Do we have that?
I don't have a Docker directory.
Should be in the API. Helm is for production use.
Yeah.
It should be in,
here we go.
In front-end PHP we just changed that. Sorry about that.
That's
so
okay.
Look for the server name. By default, it's at the beginning of the file, and you can try to just put HTTP:/ before this variable at the very beginning of the line. Try that and restart the Docker, and this should work.
There we go. So now if that is hitting Laravel.
It looks like you have another service.
Yeah. Let's see that.
So you maybe need to restart Docker again. Not sure.
Yeah, I probably do, don't I? It's fast to do as well. Yeah, herd is getting in the way a little bit there. So what I will do instead is use a little bit of magic. I believe I should be able to use this. There we go. So we can swap headers and we can say accept application LD plus JSON.
Looks like there is an issue. Can we see the? We missed something with the. Oh, okay. It's because this name, this host, is not registered by Caddy. By default, it only listens for local host, and so you should get a page from Caddy saying that this host isn't supported.
So that's more of a kind of a local configuration thing that's gone wrong there. It's nothing to do with API platform or any of the Docker setup. It's my fault for having herd installed to manage my PHP. That's what's got in the way. That's the biggest problem that I've ever found in doing any sort of development in PHP is if you got something like a local version, like herd, valet, Laragon, any of those kind of local things, and then you want to use Docker, those conflicts always get in the way. So,
yep.
But Caddy is fast. We know that. So, let's have a quick look.
So you will maybe have to remove the HTTP or to go to HTTP instead of HTTPS.
Yeah, let me drop that a second. Got to restart. Back up, refresh this.
Actually, it's probably not useful to restart, but I'm not sure. But the config change should be detected and this should be reloaded.
Yeah. Okay, so now if I quickly, if I just try that out, I just wanted to check something. So there's a response body. Headers, all of that's coming through. Caddy server, that's all good. JSON-LD, API documentation, well-known. Like, there's nothing that I can think of that I could improve upon to get this working. Like, I'm trying to think of what I could add to this to make it better for what I need, and I can't. It's easy to use. It's straightforward. Most of it can be done from the command line. If you want to add additional logic and functionality, you can do. I watched a fantastic video, I think that you gave on DDD and API platform and how you can achieve that. And it showed like, this is a default API platform and here's how you can change it and why you can change it this way. My job here is done.
If you get started with API platform, I think that the only page that you should read in the documentation is the general design consideration page that explains how it works, how you can do a rapid application very, very quickly, but also how you can integrate more advanced patterns like DDD and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's in the core documentation and it's at the beginning, if I remember correctly, and you have something like general design considerations.
So it's PHP, but it's wrapped in the background based on attributes. You're not actually building Symfony, but you've got the ability to build Symfony applications. It's plain old PHP objects with attributes that work well. I don't know how else I could say it. Just if you're building an API, you should probably use API platform, right? It's fast. It's got good support for lots of different options, great content negotiation, you know, supports HEOS out of the box, is as restful as you can get. I know I'm going to be using it more. So thanks.
Thank you.
It works. I'm going to probably call it a day there and go sit in a dark room for a little bit and just kind of wonder why I've not used this before. But Kevin, thank you very much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here.
Thank you for having me. That was great.
100% see that. You don't need to know Symfony to use API platform. You just need to know PHP and how to use a CLI.
Exactly.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to go rebuild a couple of APIs. I'll probably be done by lunchtime. So thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone else, have a great day. Stay awesome. And I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.